Hello, happy Thursday. We've got quite the conversation here today with CPI data coming out this week, much higher than expected. And so, as you might imagine, all eyes, the markets are certainly looking ahead to the Fed meeting next week. So we're going to talk about the CPI data, but also what may come next week and kind of some things to keep an eye on with not just the decision, but the Fed press conference as well. My name is Brandon Steele, financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue, Washington. As you might be able to tell, I'm actually in Vegas this week or today for a conference until tomorrow. So I'm on the road for this week's weekly update, but wanted to make sure with everything going on that we catch up on what's going on with the inflation data and what may be coming with the Fed. So thanks for joining us here today. I think let's start just real quickly on retail sales before we get into the meat of today. So retail sales came out today up 0.3%. I wanted to touch on that briefly. Now that that's behind us, let's really spend some time on the core item and what everybody is talking about in the news lately, which is inflation. So on Tuesday, we had CPI data come out, and the CPI data came out, the number came out for the month of August, suggesting a 0.1% increase in inflation. Now, that doesn't sound all that bad. However, of course, we're already running very high as far as inflation goes. And the expectations were actually that the number would be down this month, 0.1%. So I think that we had a lot of, or I should say the markets had a lot of expectations that the number was going to come down and that the Fed, as a result, may not be as aggressive as they've been talking about. For those who listen to us every week, we've been talking about really keeping an eye on this in the months to come because there was a little bit of a pullback last month in the CPI data. And I shouldn't say a pullback, a slower growth in the CPI data. And the markets really thought that this was the sign that inflation was coming down. The Fed was going to be, a little less aggressive. And here we are, just before the Fed meeting, waiting on this data point that I thought was much more relevant. And, of course, it went the other way. So that's why we've been really paying close attention to this, not speculating too much on last month's number, was because this is obviously going to be the driver as far as the Fed decision and conversation next week. Now, the reason that I think this is so important, this data, is that it's not. So obviously you can look at the headline number, the 0.1% increase, and obviously it's worse than expectations. But here's why this is so critical. If you break this down further and you actually look at the different categories, the key to understand is that energy in this last month, the inflation rate was actually down. So in other words, prices, as you probably know, prices at the pump came down 5% for the month of August. Now, the reason I share that is even with energy prices coming down 5%, we still saw an increase of CPI by 0.1%. So the question that I might pose to you is, well, what might that mean for inflation ahead, right? And where I'm going with this is that if energy prices increase again next month, moving into September, into the fall, which by the way is possibly very likely, especially with challenges in Europe and some other things going on. But if that's the case, we get energy that increases again, plus we still have the inflation pressures on all the other items, food, you name it. We could be in for another much higher inflation data point next month or for the month of September too. So this is really important. And also, if you look at core CPI, that was actually up 0.6% this month. So inflation, I feel like I say this every time. Inflation is here. It's going to continue to be persistent. The Fed is going to do what they can, although I think that there may be some more tools that they should address, but they're going to continue to raise rates. And obviously we'll see that next week. So with that, before I jump into the question of the week, which is all about the Fed conversation next week, coming up next week, we have housing data, but of course, again, it's all about the Fed on Wednesday. So we'll obviously catch up. That will be after Thursday. And so what I want to address this week, which is a great question of the week from Casey, what to watch in the Fed conference next week. And this is, I think there's two parts to this. The first part is the decision. And I think honestly, the decision is not nearly as important as what they say in the conference, the press conference. So the decision is probably going to be 75 basis points, maybe 100 basis points. That's how they're going to hike most likely. I think that it's probably most likely we see 75 basis points. I wouldn't weed out the chance for 100, but just based on what they've done in the past, I think they might have shared that direction prior if they were going to get that aggressive. So let's just say most likely it's 75 basis points. However, that I think the market has factored that in. What I think is really important is what Fed Chair Powell says in the press conference after. So after the decision, they're going to announce their plans moving forward through the year. Leading up to this point, I think it's been very much believed that in the coming, I think there's 2 more meetings this year. In the coming 2 meetings, the Fed likely would do 50 basis points, get us to, I think, basically that 4% number that they've been talking about, and kind of ease up. Now, with the new data point, what I'm curious is will he share that they might be actually more aggressive in the coming meetings too? And so that's really what I would suggest kind of keeping an eye on is in that press conference, how he shares their game plan for the coming meetings and potential rate hikes going through the end of the year. So I hope this is helpful. Again, I unfortunately, obviously we've spent so much time on the Fed lately, and it is what it is. I mean, it's really what's driving the market lately. It's where all eyes are turning. And so obviously we need to spend some time there. So we will break down next Thursday what comes of the Fed meeting. In the meantime, hopefully this is helpful to get a little glimpse, a little insight into what we're watching moving forward. Have a great upcoming weekend. I will be back in the office next week. So we will see you next Thursday at 3 p.m.